Hello everybody, it's Tim here again. Here another movie review, this time for The Crow 2024. Now this film, it's been in the works for a while. They've been trying to get a reboot of The Crow off the ground for a while. Sorry, I got another nose itch there. But yeah, they've been trying to get a reboot of The Crow off the ground for a while. And even at one point, I think it was like Luke Evans and Jason Momoa were rumored to star in a reboot of this, and so it never really came to be until we finally got around to this one. They ended up getting Bill Skarsgård as the Crow. It's directed by Rupert Sanders, who I think the only other movie I know that this guy did was Ghost in the Shell, which I think I remember thinking was just like all right. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen that. But uh, so in terms of this movie, it came and it's pretty much went. It was a bomb. Um, which kind of makes sense. The Crow, really, outside of Brandon Lee, is not really that well known. This is much more definitely of a cult type property. Um, and even part of the reason the original one is so remembered is because sadly Brandon Lee, tragically passed away during the making of it, which was horrible. But that is part of the reason why that movie is so remembered. But at the same time, it was an awesome movie. In my opinion, the original Crow was a masterpiece. Um, but it is actually very different from the graphic novel. So if you did do a reboot, you could take more from that graphic novel, and you could do something unique with it. So in terms of this reboot, how do I feel about it? It's got like mixed to negative reviews from critics. Most of the audience seems mixed to negative as well. How did I feel about it? Overall, I liked it. I gotta say, I'd give it a thumbs up. Not a solid thumbs up or a big thumbs up, but just like a thumbs up. From 1 to 4, I'd give it a 3 out of 4. I like this film. It is not a great film. It is not some long lost masterpiece. It is never going to be as remembered as the original. Not just because of the fact that Brandon Lee tragically passed away during the filming of it, but also because it's not on the filmmaking level of the original at all, nor is the writing. But this is not a bad film. I can definitely see why hardcore fans of The Crow or fans of the Crow graphic novel would not like this film. I can see it. Um, as far as I go, though, like in terms of how I feel about this, I watch the movie. I go into every movie with a critical eye, but at the same time, I try to be fair with every movie. I wasn't going in with like a chip on my shoulder, just wanting to hate this movie in general, just because it was a remake or a reboot of the property. Like I wasn't going in there and be like, "Stop Brandon Lee, fuck you." Like I'm not one of those types of people. I went into this movie completely fair, without any chips on my shoulder, just to look at the movie and watch it normally and just give it a fair shot. And I would say overall, it's not a perfect film. There are some obvious flaws here, but it is good, in my opinion, as a revenge flick, which is what this really is, and pretty much what all the Crows are, including the original. The original Crow was a revenge movie that pretty much got by on the, or not so much got by, but really got elevated because of the fact that it had Brandon Lee's charismatic portrayal in it, and it had the awesome soundtrack and the great gothic visuals and style to it. That's what really elevated that film, because if you actually pay attention to the plot, it's pretty much a paper thin plot. It's just a basic revenge movie plot. But just the style of it, like the look of the Crow and everything in that soundtrack, it's friggin' awesome. And just like, yeah, Brandon Lee's charismatic performance is really good, which ends up making that a masterpiece level film. And you really feel the emotion in the movie because of Brandon Lee's charismatic performance and because of the gothic visuals and everything. They like all stack on top of each other and complement each other. So for that, I thought it worked really well that way. And I'm sorry about my phone moving around then. It's hard for me to balance it with one hand there. But yeah, that's really elevated that original film. The sequels, The Crow City of Angels, I kind of go back and forth on. Compared to the original, it is shit. But as its own Crow film, as much as it can be, because that movie was hacked up by the Weinstein Company. Their finished released version is like so close to the pretty much being almost being a remake of that original film. As it is, just taking it as its own film, it's all right as a time waster. The Crow Salvation, that's another one. Like none of the sequels are any good directly compared to the original film. Like I'll go ahead and say it, this is easily the second best Crow film, easily. Um, Production values alone make this the second best Crow film. But yeah, the third one, Salvation, by itself, I think it's a good Crow film. And like, once again, compared to the original, it's just kind of meh. And then the Crow Wicked Prayer is freaking awful. That is dog shit, with or without being compared to the original. This one, like I said, is good. Bill Skarsgård in the movie, he's not great in this film, but I think he does a good job in terms of his character. His character is only okay throughout most of the film because he doesn't get a lot of development, but throughout the movie, because you spend the most time with him, obviously, because he is the Crow, you start to get more of a vibe of him and everything, and also because he gets the cool action scenes by the end, that he ends up being good for me in this film. I thought he did a good job. The chick who played Shelley in this, or this version of Shelley, what the actress's name, or I believe she's actually might be a singer. It's like FKA Twigs or something. She was good as well. Sorry, I had a cough, but I had no problem with like any of the acting performances in this. Really, some of the dialogue does not really work. Some of it is like hit or miss. Like the love dialogue between Eric and Shelley, Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs or whatever, it is kind of, it's hit and miss because some of it is cheesy and does not really land. It just feels like that kind of generic, like teenage, like emo love type dialogue stuff you would hear. But other portions of the dialogue does kind of work in like that young romance type way. I've heard some people complain that they didn't really buy the characters being like hardcore in love. I'm half and half on it because in the movie I do feel like the actors are trying, but their characters are underdeveloped, but they're trying. And when the dialogue does land, I do think that the actors have chemistry together. It opens with like this horse dying or whatever. He's just wrapped up in barbed wire where it's trying to be saved by the character Eric, who grows up to be Bill Skarsgård or whatever it is. I guess it's supposed to be his mom is like trailer trash, asleep in the trailer, doped up and passed out. And he's not able to save the horse. The horse dies. Of course, that's a metaphor for basically later where he's able to finally like rescue Shelley, and then you see him like have a vision or whatever where the horse like gets up and all that, so he's able to rescue the person he loves, or the being he loves. And that's one of the things about this movie, like I'm saying, their characters are underdeveloped. I wanted more backstory for Eric in this, Bill Skarsgård's versions of Eric, and the same thing with Shelley in this. I wanted more backstory with her. Like, you get enough in terms of their dialogue and their performances to know mostly who these characters are. Like, they pretty much meet in rehab because Shelley's trying to run away from something, and the bad guy's Danny Houston. And you find out later that's because he basically has demonic powers because he made a deal with Satan to stay out of hell. If he brings Satan like clean or innocent souls, he can pretty much mind control them and tell them to do stuff, and they'll go kill themselves or kill somebody else or some shit. And he does stuff for other people in exchange. Well, they do stuff for him, and in exchange he gives them wealth and power. Basically, Danny Houston does, because he's rich. So it's pretty much also a take on like the upper class too there, and I actually kind of like that. I've heard some people say it kind of feels like John Wick, somewhat, but maybe like the first John Wick, but not 100%. It still mostly feels like its own thing to me in this. Like this really feels like a crime, like revenge film, really. More so than even a Crow film at times, and that will be another disappointing thing I think for some people, because there may be not enough of the feel of the Crow in this, and that's one thing I'm getting to. Like, this is really not a remake of the original Crow. It is not a reboot of that original Crow. This is its own film, its own Crow movie. Like, other than the names Eric and Shelley, this has nothing to do with that original film. Nothing. This could easily just be The Crow 5, like after Wicked Prayer. This could easily just be the 5th film in the series. Like, this has nothing to do with that original flick. And it really doesn't have much to do with the graphic novel. Like I'm saying, this really just feels like yet another Crow film. Just another standalone Crow film. And that's really what it is and what it plays as. Like, if you're going into this comparing this directly to the original film, you probably aren't going to like this. But that's not what this film is going for, like, at all. And I guess you'll either see that as a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe wishing that this film... Sorry about that, another cough. I've had allergies lately. But yeah, you might see that as a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you feel. Maybe you'll be disappointed because you wanted more feel of The Crow or that classic movie. Me, I was half and half on it, like most things in this. Like, it was bugging me at first, but then I was like, you know what? They're doing their own thing. Can I get on board with this? How do I feel about it? Because that's what they're doing. They're not trying to remake that original film at all. At all. Other than the names, and I do wish that they did just change the names, because this is clearly not Eric and Shelley from the comic or the original film. Like this, you could have changed Bill Skarsgård's character's name to Bob, like Bob the Crow, and it would have been the exact same movie. But yeah, they eventually they meet in rehab, and you just kind of get like the idea of who they are as characters, how they're both broken and they find each other or whatever. It's a little on the nose, but the actors are mostly selling it. And I've heard some people complain that they don't really feel like the characters like really 100% like love each other, like hardcore love. But at the same time, they're both supposed to be pretty young here, like Eric and Shelley, this version. Like they come off like they're really just in like their early 20s, really, in terms of the way they're playing it. Bill Skarsgård's only 34. He's like my age, and the way he's playing it really comes off like he's supposed to be like early 20s. And the same thing with Shelley. So I mostly bought it. At the same time, it does feel like they cut out more things of their backstory and everything. Like I wanted to know more about like what broke Eric in his life and why the hell he ended up in rehab and everything. Like what else did he go through to get here? And I wanted more backstory on Shelley as well. You eventually get a little bit more throughout the movie with her mom or whatever, who basically you find out sold her to Danny Houston or gave her up so she could have wealth. So she's a bitch. So but yet I still wanted more. That's one of the problems with this movie. It's like the first act of this movie is like entirely like build up to the love story and then meeting and coming together, and it is a bit slow paced at times, and I was getting bored here and then, or now and then. But at the same time, I thought the actors were doing good enough to where I could get on board with them. And like I said, as characters, they were just kind of okay. But I thought the actors throughout the movie were doing a good enough job to where by the end I felt like I was mostly won over by. I'm still not 100% sold on their love story because I feel like stuff was chopped out that would have gave it more heart. They probably did that to like make the pacing move a little faster because they probably didn't realize that this film was a little slow. You can tell watching this that it needed a second edit. And even with Danny Houston, he's underdeveloped. Like, what did he go to hell for? I mean, he's basically, I guess, immortal as long as he gives souls to Satan. So, like, who was he? What did he do? You know, there could have been more there, I think. So he's underdeveloped as well. But he does a good job. Danny Houston pretty much always plays a villain. And in this, I think he does do a good job throughout this movie, and I think he does fit what this film's going for. In terms of having, like, the higher class be the villains, I think he does work. He's nothing compared to like Top Dollar from the original film played by Michael Wincott, but he's not trying to be. This is like 100% once again its own character and its own Crow movie. I will say I was disappointed by the fact that after they get killed, I like the brutal attack though, to where they're like both smothered with these bags over their heads. That was pretty cool. And when Eric is in like purgatory or whatever, Bill Skarsgård's talking to like this Indian kind of dude or whatever, supposed to be like this guide. He kind of takes the place of Skull Cowboy from the comic, who basically tells him all the rules of the Crow and shit. And if you doubt as long as your love remains like pure or whatever, or focused or something, you'll be basically unkillable. But you're still gonna feel pain, which I thought was a good, cool change from the original Crow. Here, the Crow does feel the pain when he gets hit, but he keeps regenerating and he won't die. So that was kind of cool, because throughout the movie he's getting like the shit beat out of him, but he's still healing and keeps coming. That was kind of cool, and it gave the movie more of a gritty feel. This is a more gritty movie than the original in terms of the violence and stuff. It's not as stylized. It's more low key. Which in some ways I do think hurt it for me, because I was expecting the Crow in this to have more martial arts abilities and everything, but they don't even attempt that. Like, they don't even have, because Bill Skarsgård did martial arts in Boy Kills World. Here, they don't even attempt it. Here, he just basically is like a basic fighter who just fights with what he has, you know? When he flies off on the criminals, he'll shoot them or beat the shit out of them with an object or something, or headbutt the shit out of them, or slice them up with a sword, because he's basically unkillable. The Crow is, so that's pretty much what they went with. In some ways, I kind of like that, because it gives it more of a gritty feeling, but at the same time, I did miss the Brandon Lee, like, martial arts fighting from the original. I will say the climax of this in the Opera House with the Crow with the samurai sword after Bill Skarsgård finally puts on the Crow makeup and everything, that was pretty badass. I will also say that I did miss like the look of the Crow throughout like the second half of this movie, because when he comes back in the second half, he's pretty much still himself, like going around trying to find out who the criminals are and everything, find out their location and everything. And I get the point of it. It's supposed to be like a character arc to where he loses stuff more and more to vengeance or whatever to accomplish, avenging his woman who he loves. I get it. And so by the end, he puts on the Crow makeup, using tattoo ink and everything. I get what they're going for. And there was a funny scene at the end, like after he beats this criminal to death with like a shotgun to the face, he puts like a cigarette in his mouth. He's like, "Here, hold this." And the way Bill Skarsgård delivered the line did make me laugh. Like, his character is mostly okay, but Bill Skarsgård has charm in the performance and charisma in the performance to where it works as its own Crow. But again, it's not Eric Draven. It's its own thing. Like I said, this character could just be called Bob the Crow. And one of his friends, I think it's like the guy who gave him some tattoos or something, I believe, like, he gets killed as well, and that's when he really flies off and starts like beating the shit out of the criminals and everything, and that's when he beats the dude to death with a shotgun to the face. That's in the movie preview, in the trailer for the movie, I mean. You get to the end of the film, it's the climax in the opera house, and he's slicing everybody with the sword. I really like this. This is really fun. I will say this, I wish more of the action in the movie was like this, but when it does get here, this is extremely fun. He's cutting the shit out of people, and he puts it in one dude's mouth and like pushes it back through his mouth and causes like his whole lower half to like come loose. That was pretty cool. And he like takes off the dude's arm and has the blade like going through him or whatever at the same time. And like, well, he has the blade like through his back coming out of his chest, and he like pulls the dude's head like to the blade like sticking out of his chest and stabs him in the eye with it. It was really cool. And another dude, he like curb stomps him. This was cool action, and it was really gritty. I liked it. I like the look of the Crow in this as well, like the way he looks with the makeup. I actually like the way he looks with the tattoos with the makeup on better than when he just has the tattoos on. Like, it's not the style I would have went for with the Crow. I actually didn't mind the more gangster look for Jared Leto's Joker because I thought that one worked as its own thing. Here, in terms of the Crow, I wasn't 100% sold on the tat look and everything for Eric Draven in this, for this version of the Crow. At the same time, I didn't mind it, and I got used to it. But by the end, though, when he puts on the makeup and everything, I think it really complements it. Maybe with the Joker, it was the fact that he always had makeup on, so it just made it work. Here, when he does put on the makeup at the end with the tattoos and everything, it looked good. I will say I did miss like the Crow feeling like him and Eric are like one being, you know, like they did in the other movies where he's like seeing through his eyes and everything, like he sees through the Crow's eyes. I did miss that. Like the actual Crow just kind of flies around throughout the movie. It doesn't really feel like a character like it did in the original. Like the Crow is all like his place in the movie is almost took by this like Native American Indian dude in Purgatory or whatever, who's basically a spirit, I guess, spirit guide for people. They don't really explain what he is, but you get enough of an idea that he's some kind of spirit guide or whatever. And the other thing I did kind of appreciate about this, how they changed the formula up. Here in this, he's not trying to so much just avenge Shelley, but he's also trying to save her spirit, because if he kills Danny Houston or stops him or whatever and all that, he also is, it will also bring Shelley back from the afterlife, because she's basically in hell, because that's where the innocent souls go that Danny Houston takes or corrupts. And so if he stops him, if the Crow stops him, then her soul will be allowed to come back to Earth, and she'll basically get to come back to life. So yeah, different kind of scenario going on here, but I think it works. But at one point in the movie, he actually does doubt like Shelley, like his love for Shelley, because of the fact that he sees the video of her killing somebody else when she was like corrupted by Danny Houston or whatever, using his mind control. And so that causes him to be weakened, and the only way he can come back yet again from Purgatory, after he gets shot with a shotgun by one of the criminals, is if he switches places with Shelley in basically in hell or whatever, in some kind of purgatory hell, and she'll be allowed to come back, but he'll have to stay there. So it's going to be like one of those bittersweet type endings, more similar to the ending that they originally intended for Crow City of Angels, which was going to be Ash has to stay on Earth and not be reunited with his son because he stays to try to save Sarah, and the Sarah character still gets killed, so he's fucked. Here, though, it is more of a bittersweet type thing, similar to that, but at the same time, though, it is also goes along with that whole romance type, you know, vibe or whatever, in terms of the love story of the Crow, because he is doing this for the woman he loves, and she'll be allowed to come back to Earth and live a full life. And so you get to the opera house at the end, he's like taking everybody out and all that, and he walks out on stage and throws two of the heads of the people he cut off out into the crowd. That was pretty cool. And then he goes to take out Danny Houston. Danny Houston tries to like use his mind control powers on the Crow to like, kind of seems like he's trying to zap him of his power or whatever, bleed him of it, so he'll kill him off using that. But it doesn't work, and he snaps out of it because of his love for Shelley. And you get a flashback to the scene where she's like, if you something about, I forgot the line, but it's something about, if you're trying to love me or whatever, if I'm doing wrong or something, then love me harder or something like that. But it works emotionally in the sequence because you buy it with in this moment because of the way it's filmed and the music and everything. Like I said, though, in terms of the relationship, it does come off more like two young people or two teenagers in love, but it does work in context of this movie. And so he grabs Danny Houston, the Crow does, and takes him to Purgatory, and while he's there, he basically gets drugged down to hell, and the Crow pushes his head down in this black goo, and he gets ripped apart by these demon-type things. Nice visual. And so Shelley comes back, and they get to have like one more moment together before she gets sent back to Earth. And when she's there on Earth, like the person there who's like resuscitating her or whatever, in place of like a paramedic, is like is the Native American dude or whatever. So you get the idea that he's, you know, linked from the spirit world also to this world, or he's some type of like quasi-angel or whatever, even though he does say, do I look like an angel? You know, obviously the joke that he's not an angel, but he is definitely some kind of like quasi-angel guardian thing or whatever. So she gets to come back, and it cuts back to Bill Skarsgård where he's in purgatory basically talking about, I'll keep my memory of her or whatever, and which will remind me of my love for her, and that'll be enough for now or whatever, and until they meet again. So he has faith basically that they'll be back together. It almost seems like a hint for a sequel, or it's almost a hint for a setup for a potential sequel. But at the same time, the director Rupert Sanders of this movie said it really wasn't intended that way, but Bill Skarsgård said it had a much more definitive ending before. As it is, you can take it either way. It does feel like one of those endings where the last phrase can go like either way. Like, yeah, maybe if this did really well, we'd do a sequel. But at the same time, it also wraps the story up and just gives it a bittersweet ending. But yeah, overall, as its own Crow movie, I liked it. I'd give this a 3 out of 4. I thought it was good. It's not a great movie, it's not a masterpiece, and it won't be remembered like the original, but it's easily the second best Crow film in this subpar franchise, which is really not a franchise, it's only one movie, but it's easily the second best Crow film. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again.